knowing your numbers could make a big opportunity make sense and allow you to capitalize. It could also help you avoid the biggest mistakes ever in your business that'll eat them alive if you know that information.
Well, that's a great example of not always is it the case that scale solves all problems.
Yep. Scale might create problems you didn't even know you could have. Welcome, affiliated listeners, to another special Pillow Talk episode. But today is really fantastic because we're going to take our normal couple pillow talk and turn it into a throuple.
I'm so excited.
Thomas is very excited for bringing in a new member. I was a little bit offended, but we worked through it. Lots of counseling. It's all good. And we're actually going to be talking about a very important question with our special guest that we're going to be bringing in. And that is going to be talking about what and how should I pay my affiliates? And for affiliates, how should I get paid? This is something we deal with a lot. So let's bring in our VP of sales, an ex-banker, and truly a man that understands finance numbers and having the boring conversation about them. I'm also a big fan of aviation. No surprise with the numbers guy. But we bring in Dominic Keenan, our VP of sales. Dom, how are you doing?
Well, thanks,
Or can I call you Dominic for the rest of this podcast just to throw you off and make you feel weird?
Knock yourself out. No, thanks for the invite back. It's been a minute.
Yeah. I love how you're holding your pillow like a football, as if you could make it more masculine. We'd like you to put it right up front.
The pillow talk thing.
Yeah.
That's unique branding, gents.
Yeah, it is.
Nice work.
You got to cuddle it. You know, you cuddle your ideas along with the pillow. It's really good.
Very good.
So we've made Dom very uncomfortable right off the jump, right? So Thomas, actually, before we jump into this, I think this is important. You've traveled with Dom a lot. We should introduce him to the audience. What's a fun story that you could share in your travels with Dom when you guys were both BDMs back in the day? And we'll jump into the very exciting subject about how to pay your affiliates and what you should pay them. But first, let's embarrass Dom.
It's kind of embarrassing for both of us. I don't know. I was going
Even
to...
better.
It's not all that embarrassing. I don't know. But we're going to Bangkok. We had our layover in Seoul, Korea.
Oh,
and we're both...
Yeah.
I mean, Dom's a huge aviation geek and knows how airlines work way better than the average person. And I'm not a slouch when it comes to travel. And we start boarding what we think is our connecting flight from Seoul to Bangkok. And they're checking the passports and stuff. And the guy looks at ours and he looks at the thing and he looks at the back and he's like, "This isn't your flight." We're like, "No, it's boarding. We're going." He's like, "No, this is going to Honolulu." We're like, "What?"
I would have been good with the alternative.
Yeah, it would have been a bad place to end up. Their seating might have been weird.
And he's like, "Yeah, your flight is leaving now." We're like, "Oh."
In like Terminal Z.
Yeah.
On the other side of the airport.
So we spent the night in the Seoul airport. Mr. Flight ended up on a connecting the South Korean Airlines
Airways,
flight.
I think. Yeah.
And it was, yeah.
Fun.
It was cool.
Very
747. Only time I've ever been on one.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you would find the plain nerd thing out of that.
If I remember, Thomas took photos of me like geeking out, looking around the cabin of this like beat up 30-year-old airliner.
You're like, "Can I get a tour?"
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, so outside aviation nerdiness, Dom is obviously very, very well experienced. Actually comes from world banking before he came into ClickBank. And yeah, we're going to be talking about, I know a question you've dealt with a ton, which is how should I pay my affiliates? And then also the flip side for affiliates, how they should get paid. So when we're saying that, Dom, what are really the two methods, if you're talking at ClickBank, that we're probably talking to a client about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, RevShare is what ClickBank did exclusively up until 2021, 20? Something like that.
Was it that
It's
time?
been 4 or 5 years.
Feels like CPA's just been around forever.
yesterday.
But
Yeah.
it also is like 4 years ago. So, yeah.
Yeah, so there wasn't an option one way or the other. It was always RevShare. And it was interesting, when all of us started here, digital products were a really big deal. Almost in 2015 when I came here, everything was digital. We didn't sell physical products. And so really high RevShare rates weren't that unusual, where we would talk to affiliates and they'd say, "Oh, I don't promote anything unless I get 90% commission." But the interesting thing is 90% of what? And it's a function of what the sales price is, what the conversion rate is, and all of that. So we would see that back then. Now, obviously, a significant percentage of our sales go through CPA, which has been a hugely successful feature, and that gets a little more complex.
What's the real quick difference between the two?
On RevShare, you are just getting a percentage of the sale as the affiliate. So if they buy the initial product for $100, the upsell step 1 for $50, and then the next upsell step 2 for $75, then I don't remember the math on that, is $225, I think. You get, 50% of that, if that's what it is. On CPA, whether or not they take the upsells is irrelevant. You get a fixed amount. So if the vendor agreed to pay that affiliate $100 per sale, every time somebody buys the initial, regardless of what happens in the upsell flow, you get that $100. And the added complexity for the vendor when they're analyzing that is it does not include any return risk. So if the product ends up getting returned or charged back, you as the affiliate still get to keep the $100, and so that adds some risk to the vendor when they're
Quite
assessing
a bit
what
of
to pay.
risk.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the issues we've seen recently. One reason why I wanted to do this podcast episode is I don't think people understand the economics when they're a seller paying CPA sometimes, and what that actually means and what it does to their cash flow. There's a lot of benefits to doing it. Affiliates love it, right? It's more money for them at the end of the day. Also, math is really hard. I don't know if you guys know that. And so if I'm going to have to factor in profit and ad spend and my ROAS and figuring out, okay, I made this much money today, but there's an X% refund rate I have to assume. And so my profit's actually Y, and that could change if supply chain dries up and refund rates spike to 30% or something. I could lose my shirt as a media buyer.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of people demand CPA as a media buyer because they need to protect themselves on the ad spend piece of it because they've got hard costs associated to that. But it gets pretty tricky to figure out as a seller, in my opinion, what can I actually afford to pay?
Yeah.
Because there's what you think you can afford to pay. But as we've seen, if most of your sales ends up being on CPA commission, your cash flow gets really weird.
Yeah, definitely ClickBank. And I think your cash flow should get weird on CPA if
Yes.
you're doing it right. Like
Yes.
a lot of people, their cash flows don't get weird until they don't have any more cash flow. And they're like, what happened? Why is my bank account negative? They're like, well, let's talk about CPA. So, yeah, it becomes it's a kind of a shifting of risk, right? Like with RevShare. RevShare is very split in their risk, but it could create problems on the affiliate side and sometimes still on the vendor side, right? But it's a little bit more mutual risk. And then CPA, very much so, the risk is on the vendor and way less risk on the affiliate. But that could also affect like your payout potential, right? There's lots of different trade-offs there. Well, let's start breaking these down a little bit more specifically. And why don't we start by talking about them broad, like agnostic of ClickBank, and then we'll kind of bring in some of the differences with our platform when we go into it. So we know we did RevShare for a really long time. Let's actually start with CPA because I think that's a little bit more of the outside of ClickBank, and in general, that's like the sexier thing people like to talk about is CPA. It's the only time that acronym has ever been popular is definitely in the marketing world because outside that, like, whoa, we don't want one of those people around. So yeah, let's talk a little about some of the challenges of CPA, and we'll focus on the vendor side first because we know as an affiliate, it's kind of nice, right? It's simple math. So if you have any creative writing majors out there like Thomas, they're like, whoa, my life got so much easier in media buying. It's static, it's predictable, it's flat rate. And so now you just focus on the rest of your variable problems. But this thing is locked in, right? So we'll come back to that. But let's talk on the vendor side. In your experiences, Dom, what are some of the big factors or risks or things vendors should be paying attention to when they even are considering CPA that they want to have dialed in?
Well, let's talk a little bit about the history of it first. So, when it was RevShare only, and pre-COVID, there was a significant amount of traffic that came through email that was really consistent, and those guys on email, like they're more willing to take a percentage of the rebills over time. That's an income stream that comes through. As email became less and less prevalent, and I think over the past 2 years, we've seen a decrease in conversion rate on.
I think the email's gotten less prevalent. I think because media buyers gotten so much bigger. Right?
Yeah,
that piece of the pie just blew up. Yeah,
completely. Yeah. It's absolutely correct. On the media buy side, though, they need to pay their Meta bill or their Google bill like this week. They need the cash now. And
clear out the credit cards so they could spend more.
Yeah, exactly. What is not news to probably just about anybody who's media buying and listening to this is the cost of media has gone up dramatically over that time. So yeah, so it's interesting because the media buyer isn't necessarily like trying to be greedy by asking for a higher CPA. That's just the nature of the cost.
Well,
there's some in there, but
some are. Yeah.
But broad strokes, when a vendor is looking at whether they're going to be able to pay a CPA or not, because the affiliate's probably going to come to them and say, hey, I need $140 CPA to be able to make this work. Particularly with physical products, you have to back out what are my average COGS, cost of goods sold, and it's kind of difficult to do an average. What if they take 3 upsells? Your COGS are significantly higher than if they just take the initial. Also, your revenue is a lot lower if they just take the initial. But then on CPA, the affiliate does not participate in what we call the return risk. So if the refunds come through, they still keep the affiliate still keeps the commission on it. That gets pretty constraining to a vendor's cash flow. So the way our system works, to dive into ClickBank specific, I know we were talking generic, but we keep reserves to ensure that there are returns, that we have cash to cover returns as they come through. Well, if the only person on the hook for the reserves or for the returns is the vendor, then we have to keep it from the vendor. The affiliate gets that CPA paid out right away, and then Meta makes money, and everybody on that side's happy. And so the math on it gets a little bit tricky. And I know our team here spends a fair bit of time with vendors trying to figure out exactly what is the max CPA that you can pay. But it's a little difficult because we don't have transparency in, we're not getting their invoices for their 3PL, for their fulfillment, their manufacturer, and all of that. So we can't actually see the data, but we can help guide them and say, this is what we see as free cash flow, broad strokes, free cash flow to you, the vendor, based on this. I would say if I were in that position as a vendor, I would monitor my return rates, particularly chargeback rates, because there's fees associated with it, but return rates associated with each individual affiliate. Because in the aggregate, it might look great, but if you're paying a really high CPA to somebody who has a 25, 30% return rate, odds are, unless you negotiated a hell of a low CPA, odds are you're negative on that because you're eating the returns. The product already went out the door. You have to pay the 3PL to ship it. Are they going to ship it back? Can you still use it if it got shipped back? A lot of times it's been opened. It's got to be thrown out. So those are all the factors that go into it. I know it sounds kind of complex, but it is absolutely worthwhile diving into it if you're selling physical products on CPA.
Right. Yeah, you might be negative. Maybe that's okay if everyone else is positive, but that's where the balance of how you're paying affiliates comes into play, right? If you almost need more RevShare affiliates to float an aggressive CPA affiliate because of that impact of cash flow and margin that CPA has on you. Because it's... I like to use big round numbers, Dom. You threw like 225.
Yeah, I know. You really boxed yourself into a math corner.
Yeah,
I was about to say, and what would that commission be? It's just to see you say 117 something, right?
But like, it's because we've had multiple clients run into this issue. They go, "Why are you holding? It looks like 30%, 40%, X% reserves." It's like that's insane. It's like, well, we're not. We're holding maybe 10% reserves on your gross volume, but you only see the net in your paychecks reporting account in ClickBank. But that's all we can hold reserves from. So it ends up getting really weird. So like this is where I'd like you two to fact check my math here, right? But it's like if you have a $100 AOV, we're paying like a $70 CPA, which would be roughly a 70% rev share. So fairly aggressive CPA, but it's a fixed CPA payment. So there's $1 million in sales over a time period. 10% refund rate. So that's what, 70K?
Yep.
Or sorry, that's $100,000 in refunds that have to be accounted for. But there's $700,000 going out to the affiliate. So then of the third $300,000 going to the seller, in theory, we're going to pretend there's no fees here, $300,000 to the seller, there has to be $100,000 held of that $300,000 to account for the 10% refunds on that $1 million in gross. So to the seller, it looks like a 33% reserve rate that we're holding, but really it's 10% of that $1 million gross.
Yeah.
And
I see how they get there, right? Like it's, they're looking at $100,000 in reserves divided into $300,000 in vendor earnings. And then all of a sudden you get your fulfillment bill or something, and it's like, oh God, where's all my money? But if you contrast that to the RevShare option, which is similar situation at 70%. So you paid $700,000 of $1 million in sales. $700,000 went to the affiliate on RevShare. $300,000 to the vendor. But because it's RevShare and the affiliate participates in the return risk, we're keeping 10% of the affiliate's portion. So 70K comes from them, and we're keeping 10% of the vendor's portion. So out of that 300,000, we're only keeping 30.
Yeah.
And your free cash flow goes from 200 to 270, and all of a sudden that 3PL bill and your customer service bill and all of that becomes a lot easier to do. But to your point, I've had numerous conversations about that. Why are my reserve rates so high? And keep in mind, ClickBank does have a dynamic reserve system. So if the return rate is 30%, we're taking that into account because we ultimately have the cash risk on it. 30% becomes very, at that point in your example, 300K going to the vendor out of $1 million. If we're taking 30%, we're keeping the 300K. We have to. That's where the returns money comes from.
Yeah. So now they're like, you take all my money and I generate $1 million. Where is it? But I think one of the distinctions here too is we kind of talk about this. I want to step back a little bit because I think we and you mentioned this before. I really want to talk about cash risk because I think that's when this starts making sense a lot more, is who carries the cash risk in these situations and what cash risk means. Because there's like a couple things to note here too. It's one of the things that changes this, if you're doing CPA outside of ClickBank, oftentimes it is recommended or required to go to CPA network to have escrow.
Yeah.
So you're putting in a flat amount
I was
of
gonna say,
reserves.
why do we do it this way? Right?
Yeah,
we do
yeah.
it so we don't have to collect escrow up front, which lets you turn on CPA much faster, right? You don't have to build up this swath of cash in order to pay a CPA out later. So what is escrow?
So because escrow is, so that's one of the things when we talk about, hey, we have to hold all this risk or hold this cash, it's because you're able to start CPA at effectively zero, right? Like a very small amount. You're not loading in 50K of escrow.
We need 100 sales over 90 days to factor in the actual CPA calculator.
To calculate, yeah. And then for there are certain situations for our top clients, or if you work with somebody that given proper proof that sometimes we could accelerate that window.
This has been running
But
on other
that's
platforms,
just in general, you're not having to load in a large amount of cash to get CPA going, which is what you normally would have to do outside of that. But just remember that because the cash risk shifts so substantially when you run CPA on the vendor side, you are going to be holding in more. Your liquidity is going to get locked up because that cash needs to be held for the potential of refunds and returns. That's why, like what Dom said, when you move to CPA, you definitely change the way you evaluate the traffic for your affiliates.
Well, you should.
You should. Yes, you should do that.
I don't think we see clients.
A lot of them
do that.
don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
They've started to.
Yeah.
Because of this issue, right?
Well, I think margins, we talked, traffic costs have been getting higher. CPAs are then getting higher, right? And then at the same time, conversions are dipping and then email traffic conversions are going down. So that spells a story of margins getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now I think when those margins shrink, all of a sudden your cash risk and the fact that you don't have as much cash flow coming in is a bit more noticeable. You're like, wow, this is starting to get small. This is confusing to me. And so I think that's where a lot of that attention's coming from. But as we go back, I want to kind of talk about this concept of cash risk and what cash risk really means. So let's kind of spell some. I know we've talked a little bit of this, but I want to use those terms exactly. So let's kind of talk about cash risk in terms of how it could go bad on RevShare and cash risk and how it goes bad on CPA. We've already kind of talked around the CPA. So define cash risk, Dom, and then talk about what negative stuff happens. And outside of like the ClickBank world, agnostic of us taking large reserves, if you don't approprially address that cash risk.
Yeah. So, when we talk about cash risk, to go back to Thomas's example, $1 million in sales occurs. And let's just say it's some product that went gangbusters over the weekend. It is the hot new thing. And
it's a ClickBank pillow that supports your ideas.
Yeah.
And your lumbar.
Yeah, and your lumbar. Yeah.
And the vendor decides, you know what, I'm going to take my $1 million and move to Panama. And they don't pay anybody, the supplier, the fulfillment house, anything like that. Ultimately, the company that's on the hook for that money when those people eventually refund, because of course they're going to refund or charge back, they never got their stuff, is ClickBank because we collected the money. So it's our goal, and obviously people don't do that and things don't happen that fast, but we still are accountable to our shareholders and owners that we protect the company in a way that we hold enough cash, we assess the risk of each person's return rate, each seller's return rate, and that we hold enough cash for anticipated reserves if there were to be a sudden slowdown in sales. So normally we would see something like this occur maybe in Q2, right? It might be the hot health and fitness product in Q1, we know the interest in that wanes over time. And so our systems are analyzing, what is the anticipated return risk of this product and what are we seeing for returns, say, through June. And we know that the return rate is going to be much higher relative to a slower pace of sales in, say, late summer, because the health and fitness stuff is not as interesting to people in August,
I'm fat
September.
already. I'm just going to live with it through the summer. We'll
Yeah,
figure it out.
exactly. Than it is right after they made their New Year's
Golfing in
resolution.
long sleeves this year. That's what.
So that's a long way of saying the cash risk is basically how much cash do we have that is at risk of return.
And that could be the same if you're managing your own mids or with ClickBank.
Correct.
So if we remove ClickBank from the equation, I'm running outside of ClickBank. I'm running CPA. If I wasn't considering my cash risk and a similar situation where maybe even I just paid an affiliate that sent a bunch of garbage traffic.
Maybe affiliate's going, hey, I need to get paid tomorrow. I need to get paid this week. Like,
Yep.
In order to keep scaling. I don't want to lose this traffic. Okay, cool.
Yep. They took the pillow. They
Yeah.
were scaling it. Come to find out, they were putting it on, Telegram and saying that it would cause transcendental properties and you'd be able to fly with a pillow.
found
And
my
it sold
ads.
like crazy.
Okay. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, then we find out next week as we get the customer service stuff coming in, they sent $2 million. I paid them out. They've now disappeared. And all these people are like, hey, I can't fly and your pillow's crap. I want my money back. All of a sudden, my refunds go to 80%. I don't know what the other 20% are okay with. But, you're now in a situation where you've already paid out those affiliates. They've disappeared. You have suppliers, customers, banks, all asking for money that you don't have. So what do you think happens to the business at that point in time?
You get so cash constrained that unless you have some other source of cash generation, like you're done.
Yeah, so you're just kaput. Your traffic probably went down because now your affiliates aren't able to promote because you can't pay them. And so you have no new forms of traffic. Good luck getting lending. We're like, well, I have no incoming revenue, but I have a lot of debt. Can you help me? Right? It's not a great situation. So you lose your business just because that cash risk gets imbalanced and you didn't have those reserves there to accommodate for the potential.
Yeah, there's this thinking, and I understand it too, like it's prevalent in corporate America as well, is that, increasing sales pretty much solves nearly every problem. And in some cases, that's not true.
Could make worse problems.
Yeah. We see that particularly with people that outscale their operations. For somebody...
that was just it's a recent thought on Thomas's mind.
Do you have stories, Thomas?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
we need our AI version back to soothe Thomas after this.
yeah. But it makes sense, right? Like, let's just take the affiliate manager. I think all of us have advocated for all of the vendors that we work with to have very solid, active affiliate management inside their team, not just rely on somebody else to do it. If all of a sudden that person's too busy, they outscale that person and they're not looking at the return risk, and turns out some big affiliate sending garbage traffic is a 50%, like those problems just cascade on each other. So in that case, like... I work in sales and have been doing this for a long time. It's not necessarily true that scale solves all problems. Sometimes it's better to grow more slowly than to just get the next big media buyer on board. That'll solve my cash problem now. That's not necessarily true.
Yeah. So let's now talk into some specifics with ClickBank, because I think this is really key. And then we'll talk about the RevShare difference and some affiliates to kind of close it out so people aren't like, oh, we've talked so much about this.
I do want to make sure we cover, I'd be really curious what y'all would do with your business if this was like, hey, I was up an offer or whatever I'm selling. Like, how would you manage it? We kind of spoken to it a little bit, but like, what's the strategy? What's the right strategy to kind of scale with affiliates with RevShare CPA and kind of making sure that you can play ball with the right people, but not get constrained on this way?
I'll start out with one of the big things I think a lot of offer owners forget about is they have leverage in the relationship as well. So oftentimes affiliates are like, I bring you the traffic that you need. You have to make me happy. And if I want CPA, do it. And there's a lot of insecurity around the offer owners. They're like, well, if I don't pay them, then I don't get the traffic and I don't win. If you have a high converting offer that wins in the market, you have a lot of leverage. And I don't think you should forget that, right? So that's just one thing I'd always start off with. you have more leverage than you realize. But I think one of the best things with CPA is being that there's such a big cash risk, being we talked about on ClickBank specifically, you want to have a little bit of a RevShare and CPA blend to keep your cash flows healthy. And where some affiliates you should break even on, realistically, the majority you should have margin in your business as well. So I think it should always be a tier-based system, a performance-based system. So if you know someone's a diamond level affiliate and they're very, very high, very, very high up there, give yourself a limited count of how many people, one, you'd have on CPA. So you have a distribution level of like, all right, we only want this many CPA affiliates. And then create a performance incentive of them being there, of the level of traffic they have to maintain your CPA. So they have kind of a push there and a motivation. And if they say, hey, I could drive XYZ traffic, great. Prove that, and then I could give you the CPA versus let me give you the CPA instead of trying to prove it. I think you need to have a structured tier system that could be blended of here's our RevShare, here's RevShare that continues to ascend based on performance. And then if you have this level of performance, I will also offer you CPA. But in some situations, we have a seller right now, they don't even advertise CPA. They only do on a one-on-one situation so they could see what data they have because they don't want to be in that cash risk situation, especially, they even have digital products and they're still more leveraged around like, we're not so sure about CPA because it actually, I think they have a lot of rev share and higher returns so that cash flow gets constrained a lot faster on digital. But regardless, is creating this tier-based system, they have plenty of affiliates that are very happy because it's very easy for a vendor to actually offer more money on RevShare. So affiliates, if you have good returns and good rates and good product delivery, affiliates can actually make more money on RevShare once they figure it out and kind of get into it than they can on CPA because there is less risk. So they've made a lot of affiliates happy, and when people have to have CPA or they need it, they have leverage and a proof level that by the time they're even having that conversation, it's either truly one of the best affiliates out there that they want to work with, and they need to have CPA for that. Okay, we could have a couple of those. Or they have enough data that they're not making that decision blindly. They've already evaluated the refunds. They know the level of volume they do. They kind of know the affiliate, and they're like, yeah, I don't mind working with you by the time they offer that CPA. So that's one of the things I would really structure is build structure, create a structured performance-based system for your CPA and RevShare, and same with percentages and CPA levels. Just like there's lots of affiliates out there. If one says no, doesn't mean another one won't say yes. And if enough say yes, that one that said no is going to have FOMO and be like, maybe I made a bad decision. Yeah. They truly, you'll get affiliates to come back before vendors will most of the time. So there's a lot more.
And let's be clear, like the vendor, your cash flow will be less constrained if you have more RevShare affiliates than CPA, if the sales are going through that, right? And so I would always offer both as an option. Why not? I mean, it's an easy setting inside that. Some affiliates are going to take the RevShare option for sure, but you also need to make that RevShare option somewhat enticing. So I'm a huge advocate of this when it comes to affiliate management. Is every affiliate page should have a diagram of the sales funnel with links to what the sales pages look like in the upsell. That way the affiliate who's analyzing it doesn't have to go buy the product, click through, accept you have to do it multiple times to see the whole funnel. That way there's a lot of benefits to it. Continuity of whatever the advertorial was or whatever was leading into that. But beyond that, then you instill some confidence in the RevShare option. Like our take rate on OTO1 is, this %. On OTO2, it is this %. The value of our full funnel is on average this dollar amount. I personally, if I'm the one driving traffic to it, I feel a lot more confident about that. Just the fact that you know the numbers and you're willing to publish them, and I can see it, and I can make my traffic convert a little bit better for continuity of message. But ultimately, and where we started down this path is that it is generally better for a vendor's free cash flow to have at least a portion, if not a majority, of their affiliates on RevShare. Depends on the offer, but in general.
Yeah. Largely agree with both of you. I would just add a few things. It's not just about the number of affiliates on RevShare. It's about the volume everyone's producing, right? Because if you have one CPA media buyer scale and they become 90% of your sales, you kind of still end up in this issue.
Yeah.
Right? So they're all, but we put everyone else on RevShare. It's like, well, they're not producing nearly as many sales. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah. That's where we see some things get wonky where it's like, oh, we just put this one on there. The other thing, too, I love what Kyle said about the CPA performance. Like if they can hit different performance metrics, they can earn CPA or they can get it unlocked. But I would make sure you're having that conversation with the affiliates about their average order value that they're driving for you, not just your offer's average order value, right? Like I've been impressed by the sellers who can go back to the affiliate who, hey, I want to hire a CPA. It's like, hey, actually, you're underperforming to our average order value. And if you can get your AOV for your traffic to X, I'm happy to give you a bigger CPA, right? But it's like, your traffic doesn't justify more cost. And you just lean on the data and it helps drives the story, and you have to get a little more transparent. And same with quality ratios, right? It's like, hey, like would be happy to pay you more, but your refund rate is X% higher than our average, and it's actually impacting us in this way, right? So it's like, I can't pay you more even if I wanted to. Like your just traffic doesn't justify it.
Yeah. In fact, we want less traffic from you. If you could stop sending, you're costing us
Potentially,
money
right? And that is
sometimes.
sometimes the conversation. Yeah.
That aligns the motivations of the goals of the affiliate with the vendor, right? The goal of the vendor is a higher AOV.
Yeah.
The goal of the affiliate on CPA, who's not being, has no transparency into how their traffic's performing beyond the initial order. Their goal is initial sales count. Right. That's it.
Like, I get paid
conversion.
X much per sale. I just want
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and I can hear people going, well, affiliates can't control AOV. Like, what do you want me to do about it? Right. But we see when an affiliate does work with the seller on that project, they can increase and impact that, right? It's because your ad campaigns do drive behavior based on the types of clicks you're getting, right? There could be tweaks in that funnel that you're specifically sending to that the seller could be doing for you, your specific lander you're driving to. So as you start to work with a seller in that capacity, you can increase your average order value, you can lower refund rates for the traffic you're driving, and you start to have a much healthier model that can support a higher payout and higher scale. The other,
I was gonna say just going on the billing. I think
Yeah.
because I do love that, and that's why I go back to that thing I opened with. Vendors need to remember the leverage they have, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really good example of utilizing that leverage. That hey, you obviously want this because it's converting, but like I need this, so you could collaborate together. So I think that's a big thing. Is like you could still collaborate, but I think having a structure of here's the entry point, here's this, here's the expectations of what we need, and understanding between CPA and RevShare makes those conversations very easy because your affiliate manager doesn't have to guess. They just have to know, okay, well, they're at this sales level. I need to check this and this and this to see if I can increase that. And then if those don't fit, I already know what conversation I have, right? So I think that's making that simple and putting structure gives your affiliate managers, I think, easier conversations. But
and a vendor and the affiliate managers out there, and I'm sure most of them are aware, there are affiliates out there that are out there for the vanity metric. Kind of, we opened the conversation talking about RevShare, and it was, back in the day, it was like, I don't promote anything for less than 90%, or I don't promote anything for less than a $165 CPA. Well, the earnings of the affiliate are a function of the conversion rate as well. So if something converts double, you can take a hell of a lot lower commission and make more money. So it's important to keep that in mind because I know there are affiliates out there that are going to vendors and saying, hey, I don't promote anything for less than X amount. Well, what are you promoting now? How's it converting? What's the traffic source? All of that. That's a deeper conversation. So something that they should be having with the affiliate, and something that the vendor should be aware of.
yeah.
And then one of the other things that I'd be highly recommending is increase your LTV, increase your AOV, right? So you can stomach a higher thing and work with SalesBound. And this is our first ad plug that we've ever done on the podcast. So, well,
Because you're bound to increase your LTV with
Yes.
SalesBound. There you go, Arya.
yeah, Ari Bashari, he's a great friend of the podcast, friend of ClickBank, sponsors a lot of our events. And we're doing our first ad read here, which we don't actually have a script for, but the point is
We're doing a bang up job.
we're doing
I'll
it
tell
live.
You what. Thanks,
Dang
Arya.
it, we'll do it live. No, but Ari's become a good friend. SalesBound, they run a lot of the behind the scenes phone sales for a lot of the top sellers supplements on ClickBank. So if you're selling supplements on ClickBank and you're wanting to increase LTV, increase AOV, it's not really increasing AOV. It kind of is. It's like the day zero AOV basically.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And at the same time, improving your quality rates, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the great things about SalesBound is we're in this conversation. There's a lot of acquisition, but what empowers better and healthier acquisition is a stronger back end. And SalesBound does such a fantastic job. I actually had the opportunity to go to their call center and listen to their calls and see their agents.
Did they let you get on the phone?
I wanted to, and then it was going to be like the
Do you have
average.
flashbacks?
No, the average time of these calls are quite long, and I was like,
okay.
I do not have 45 minutes to figure this out.
It's time for lunch.
Yeah, if I would have, I was thinking it was like my handle time used to, it was like under 10 minutes. So I was like, yeah, I'd go do like 20 minutes of calls or something, but I was like, that would get half of a call. I was like, well, maybe not then. So, but no, they do. The energy on the floor is amazing. The calls, like listening to snippets of them, really, really impressive. And I could see why they're not only improving LTV because of the additional purchases, but they're gaining such better commitments for people with those products. So it's not the LTV in that moment with SalesBound. You're getting a better, more qualified customer that's more likely to buy from you again and again. So SalesBound is something to empower your business as a partner so amazingly. And it's almost too easy to work with them. So you're silly not to at least get a conversation, talk with Arya, and see if you could change your business. I'd point out there, change your business with SalesBound today.
Well, I do think, speaking of SalesBound, going back to your original example of like $1 million in sales, and then we end up keeping 10%. So the vendor ends up getting like $200K instead of $300 because we have to keep $100,000 in reserves. Well, all of a sudden, there's a fulfillment bill, and there's a product supplier bill, and you have to pay your customer service team and all those things. And you feel great about selling $1 million in sales, and then all the cash goes to pay all the expenses. SalesBound is a great way to get an additional revenue stream coming back into the vendor's
day
business.
Zero phone upsells.
To cash flow it. And everything I've heard, they do a fantastic job.
Yeah, for sure. So again, guys, if you have a supplement business and you were thinking, man, I'd like to make more money, but I wish it wasn't so hard, SalesBound is the answer. Be sure. I'm sure there's probably a link somewhere floating around. Maybe
Click the link in the description below.
Link in the description below. That's where Thomas is there.
Dylan's been like, say the thing.
Link in the description below. Get on a call with them. Learn more. And I'm telling you guys, like, it truly is. And this is not just, ad read stuff. Like, truly, they're an amazing company. They do a great job. And saying that from personal experience, being inside their call center, I would trust no one else better than that for welcome calls and really just improving that LTV. So SalesBound, we love you, and we know all our listeners are going to love you as well, so give them a try. Now back to reality.
I think we did a dang good job, guys.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. Awesome.
It wasn't the most concise, but dang it, we tried.
Well, nowhere to go but up from here. That's what I'll say. We did it, right?
I can't wait for our 400th episode. We have this really dialed in. Okay.
So let's go back. So I think we did a really good job talking about the structure. And we've talked well about kind of the cash risk between RevShare and not. We've talked a lot on the vendor side. Let's actually take a moment and talk on the affiliate side about why you should care about how you're getting paid and what are some of the trade-offs. We've alluded to some things, and we'll make this the last subject here.
Math is hard.
Math is hard, yes. So if math is hard to you, CPA might be really, really nice. But one of the downsides of CPA that we mentioned is it could limit how much you actually make, especially early on in your promotions. Because as the vendor, I don't really want to give you that money. I don't know what your return rates are going to be. What's your AOV? If you're coming in fresh and you're asking for CPA, that becomes a lot more challenging sometimes. You might make less.
Well, there's also make less, but also you just described an opportunity cost of time, right? You're going to spend that much time to negotiate, which could take a week or more to figure out if you can even get it, versus just running the RevShare and seeing if the campaigns back out anywhere close to where you need them to be.
Yeah, exactly. And the great thing is, even if you see your numbers on RevShare, you could almost assume what the other side and potential opportunity is, right? I know I'm at 75. That means there's 25% more for me to potentially have. And that still gives you an idea of now you could go back intelligently and say, hey, if you give me 10%, that means this to my campaigns as long as these numbers hold, and I could promise this kind of scale for you, right? So you could live in that space. So I think it provides a lot of opportunities for you. The other thing that I want to mention, I don't want to get like creative here. So I know sometimes one of the challenges that I've heard from affiliates and paid, why they like CPA is during testing, it gives them one less variable to worry about.
Sure.
So I'll take less money. I'll take whatever the lowest CPA is. I don't really care. It's just now I don't need to worry about my payout. I just worry about all the other numbers and signals. My conversions are okay. Am I going to be even close to my CPC and like all this stuff? Am I actually going to make money on this? So that being said, though, I think what's really cool is you might be able to test on CPA, but then flip to RevShare. Come back and flip to RevShare because now you know what your traffic's going to be like. You could go and ask, hey, what were the quality rates on that CPA, on that traffic that I sent? So now you get an idea of what your return rates could be. And actually flipping to RevShare It'll probably be way easier for the vendor. And you'll now know, well, this converts. If I know my AOV and quality rates, I might actually be able to make more money on RevShare and understand that. But I got my testing out of the way. So boom, go scale. And now optimize for AOV if you want to.
Yeah,
right?
I do see a fair number of affiliates who will, I mean, they just have a second account and they're running tests in parallel. If the vendor is going to offer them both CPA and RevShare, it's worth testing.
Yeah.
It obviously depends on the numbers, right? If you're getting 15% RevShare or
Yeah.
175 CPA, that's not going to work out.
Yeah.
But generally, the vendor is going to be more comfortable with it, and you could make more easily could make more money because you get to participate in everything else.
Yeah. And I think sometimes one of the biggest things why affiliates miss out on RevShare or asking for it is it's a lot easier for a vendor to say yes, right? It's just easy. Like, well,
are there vendors not offering RevShare?
no, but I think for the most part, some affiliates only ask for CPA.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but like sometimes you might say, well, hey, it's a lot easier to get an 85% commission than it is to get a $150 CPA, even though sometimes that commission might actually be more than the CPA, depending on someone's funnel. So, but it's just an easier ask for the vendor because I don't have to do all this math calculation. I have to go, okay, well, what are my COGS, right? What are my COGS at the end of the day? I'm like, okay, well, does that fit to where I still am covered? Sweet. Percentages are easy math for me. Boom. Go and say yes to that.
Yeah, I think pretty much everybody would offer
That's the
RevShare
default
or CPA.
setting.
Yeah.
So they kind of have to.
But it's how it's presented. And I remember there was a large supplement vendor that I used to work with quite a bit who, I mean, it was just right there on their affiliate page. You had to talk to the affiliate manager before you could sign up to promote, but you had to click a radio button. There was 3 options, and you want CPA of this, RevShare of this, or RevShare, lower RevShare with lifetime on all the rebills, you know? And that was where I first heard that idea about just testing between the affiliates testing between the different commission options was because you would just go and sign up with, you know, affiliate account 1 in option number 1 and affiliate account 2 in option number 2 and see which one penciled out. It's initial testing, so we're talking low volume. You're not going to lose a ton of money, but you should be able to declare a winner pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense, yeah.
With all things being equal too, you know, that's really nice. So, yeah, I think it's good to understand that there's value in both methodologies, right? And depending on your business, I would say the only time I've seen where CPA is a requirement and will never go away from it is agencies or large media buyers that normally have multiple teams that have systems that basically cannot work on a RevShare model. They built an entire infrastructure to say we could only feed into our tracking a CPA. So
well, and keep in mind for that type of affiliate agency, their model breaks because they have high fixed costs. But those high fixed costs enable high potential scale.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily them being greedy. It is
the
cost of running that
like
agency.
you said, it's something the way they're built, they have to have that number. But I actually tell you if you're talking with an agency that has that, that's a good thing. Like you said, they
for
built,
sure.
To get to that level, you have to do something well enough to justify doing that. So if there's true agencies that need that from a structural level, also as an offer owner, you could probably take a sigh of relief. This is the same as, you know, somebody from a part of the world you've never heard of and has too many consonants that says they'll send you $1 million in the next 3 days, and they do, and then you lose all of it, right? Those are different people.
Yep.
I think there's also the group of affiliates, right? They get trained by a certain guru or something like that, and they have their script or their pitch, and they, I need X, right? And they don't know the nuance that we're talking about here and why a seller might do X or Y, offer this or that. They're just going, I need this because my teacher told me to say this.
Yeah. Because this is the order bump that I got where I get these scripts that tell me how to get better CPA. But no, I think lots of this comes down to a conversation at the end of the day. This really needs to be a conversation. You need to understand your side, their side, and collaborate, and everyone wins through that. But I think hopefully you understood that there's definitely some big risks to CPA that you need to think about in your business in terms of what it does to cash, how to manage your affiliates.
It does unlock a lot of scale, as Dom said, right? Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Yeah. Definitely not trying to paint the picture of CPA bad, but it's like
No.
the nuance of it.
Yeah.
And how to not cut yourself with it.
I'd put it this way: how to not
shoot
make
your eye
CPA bad is just to understand the impacts it has to cash. Once you understand that and you build that into your business, it's amazing.
What's it? I wrote down know your books.
Know your books, yes.
If you don't know your monthly, weekly, daily P&Ls, right, which 90% of our clients don't, but highly consider figuring that out and being able to have a P&L down to your affiliate level, right? And your traffic, which is basically your customer acquisition level. So how are you actually monitoring these people, and how are you, and all the other acquisition streams you have coming in?
Yeah, and that's totally understand why that's an intimidating thing to do, right? Like if you're a fantastic product creator,
Math is hard.
Yeah, it's tough. But
I was thinking back, it's like I thought about changing to a math major back in the day. So,
but it's not necessarily a plug for these guys, but like I see great results from some of the clients that work with like Fully Accountable or Prime Corporate Services or something like that. Because
you already did one ad read, Dom.
I know, but all of a sudden that burden and that stress is taken off, and it becomes really clear. Like in the end, you want red light, green light, right? Like I should increase this affiliate CPA, this other affiliate. I didn't realize that a 40% return rate. That's a red light. We're not doing that anymore. And so it's good to have that in front of you, and makes running a business much less stressful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the last point is I love that. Know your books. It is, I think, out of all this, CPA and commissions, and I would say acquisition is always improved and supercharged by knowing your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, acquisition becomes a really dangerous game of luck and guessing, right?
Same on the affiliate side too, right?
Yeah, same on the affiliate side. You need to understand your numbers.
So if you are getting a great CPA payment from this seller over here for this offer and campaign you're running, you can probably float some other rev shares that are a little riskier.
Yeah.
Right? And your average earning per campaign is going to be X. But if you're just looking at a per campaign level and just this has to be X because this is the way I operate, you kind of limit your scale.
Yeah, maintain
potential.
both positive cash flow and profitability.
Yeah.
And you can have negative cash flow and still be profitable in the long run, but not for very long.
Yeah.
Your working capital goes away.
Yeah. And I was going to say the other thing too with RevShare, if you're an affiliate, understanding your numbers and then understanding their numbers or what numbers could affect you, right? So return rates today don't always mean return rates 30 days from now. So understanding that flow, do they have a good idea of their average return rates? How long have those been going on for? Things like that could just help you understand to ask the right questions, know your numbers, know their numbers, know how they all interplay with each other. And the more you know, the better you'll be.
The more you know.
So one last thing, I just want to share a good story though, of just why knowing your numbers is so important. And this is funny because this is actually a pretty regular occurrence back when we were pure RevShare. And I remember talking to one of my clients as an account manager, and they had been presented with, at the time, easily the largest affiliate in the email space. They're like, I'll cut a deal with you. I will send to my list. There are millions of people list. But they had to do 100% RevShare, so give all of it away, and a CPA on top of it, right? And so he's like, I remember I was talking to the client, like, I think we need to do it. And I was like, well, I mean, you're losing money on that, right? Like, do you know how long it's going to take you to recover? Do you even know how much you're losing, like, overall on your LTV? And he was like, I don't know any of those numbers. And I was like, but he's like, but I feel like I need to take this because we'll get so much traffic, more scale, fix all our problems. And I said, like, listen, you could just essentially prove out that you're going to lose your business if you say yes to this without knowing the numbers. You can't do anything like that blind. So great opportunity. It might be the biggest mistake you ever make in your life if you say yes to this without knowing these numbers.
Yeah.
They ultimately ended up saying no, but I could tell you many other people said yes to that same deal and they then lost their businesses. And I think some situations that same individual would then sue them for all the money you get and then basically take the business from them afterwards.
I was going to say, was this just an M&L or like way to squash competition?
It might have been. But I would say I know there's affiliates now that'll strong arm people for CPAs that are effectively structured in the exact same way.
Yeah.
And they'll run up traffic until you don't have cash. And they could move to another offer, but you don't. So I just always bring that up there. That's knowing your numbers could make a big opportunity make sense and allow you to capitalize. It could also help you avoid the biggest mistakes ever in your business that'll eat them alive if you know that information.
Well, and that's a great example of not always is it the case that scale solves all problems.
Yep. Scale might create problems you didn't even know you could have. Yep. And it's be some of the biggest problems ever. So with that, though, we could probably talk through this forever. Dom, it was great having you on here. How do you enjoy
thanks
Pillow
for the
Talk?
invite back.
Yeah,
I'm a big fan of Pillow Talk. I love this format.
Yes, it's good. Well, we're glad to have you on. This throuple might exist beyond this one time frame. So maybe another weekend, another bottle line later. We'll have another episode.
Bring our wives.
Yeah.
No, stop it, Thomas. You don't want to ruin it. But with that, guys, we covered a lot over here. We really appreciate your time, Thomas. What do we tell the people out there?
We tell them happy scaling.
and know your books, right? So until then, be safe, and we enjoy talking to you and snuggling with you next time.
Let us know what you think of Dom. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Drop us a
Also,
comment.
rate,
Yeah.
review, subscribe, and most
All those
importantly,
things.
reach out to Salesbound and definitely some comments for Dom. Talk about his shirt. Talk about how he held the pillow. We're big fans of his very strong hairline.
We have so many call to actions.
Yes,
Gosh, we have
yes. There's a lot to do.
So many.
The
A lot to
should
do.
be-
Yeah.
The comment should be
The
great.
biggest thing I want to hear is let's, on a scale of 1 to 10, Dom's hairline for a politician. It just reeks Republican strong, is what I say. I would vote for it for years.
He's just rocking whatever he had as like a first grade baseball pitch.
Yeah, which is exactly every conservative's hairline looks exactly that same.
I'm
way.
sending the end of this video to my barber.
Awesome stuff.
I'm just going off whatever 12-year-olds have. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's an effective strategy. I'm just losing whatever seems to happen here. So, well, with that, guys, again, be safe, rate, review, subscribe, comment on Dom's hairline. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thank you.